we carried out, or at least our oceans guys carried out, a marine use analysis. Who is doing what, where, with chapters on alternative energy, aquaculture, all these things that you can read here. So what does this work tell us? Well, this is a little sample analysis out of the sensitive areas where the redder colors are areas where there's multiple map layers of important things. If you count the layers, it gets a higher number and hence a redder color. Shows where there's some very intense hot spots, a lot going on, high biological productivity, mostly explained in the EOAR through the oceanographic analysis, but these are areas that you might want to treat in a special way. So a bit more on what does this work tell us. By and large, biological productivity in this area is demonstrating bottom-up control. Good ecological theory suggests it should. The plankton production is only moderate, but the long-term fisheries yield of resident species is quite high compared to other areas along the North American coast. We think that's because the continental shelf is quite wide and the primary production is retained and can move up the food chain. The lower trophic level production and distribution strongly affected by climate change, climate variation. The upper trophic levels, the fish, are affected both by climate change variation and by fishing controls. Predator controls, top down, are not generally pushing themselves way down into the food chain, but there are exceptions, and one of the exceptions has to do with increased populations of sea otters and the effect they're having in restricted areas. There's no clear indication of what are called wasp waste food web structures, where much of the energy in the ecosystem flows or is funneled through a very few key species. And that's, if you have that situation, you have to be particularly careful about what you do around those key species. We don't see that here. So what don't we know? Well, lower trophic levels, benthic ecosystems, poorly known, described, monitored in PNCIMA. This goes back to the traditional focus of DFO, commercial species. During the Oceans Action Plan era, we did significant amount of multi-beam bathymetry to get an idea of the bottom characteristics in Hecate Strait mostly, but there's a lot more to be done, and that was work done by the Hydrographic Service and NRCat. Distribution, abundance, ecological role of larval and juvenile fishes, especially some of the forage fishes, big weakness. And if you're looking for examples, you know, we have declines in Central Coast sockeye and ulican, marine mortality that seems to be high for unknown reasons. That's a problem here. Our knowledge on food web structure and linkages are rudimentary, and the numerical models that we've used with this are similarly rudimentary. We have a huge flux of migratory fishes, hake, salmon, in and out of the PNCIMA large ocean management area, and that adds to the complexity and uncertainties on an ecosystem base. It would be easier if everybody stayed there, we could measure them there, we could see how fast they were growing. Traditional ecological knowledge was not included in this analysis, and it was purposeful and bureaucratic. We met early in the process with Russ and some others and came to the conclusion that we would not be able to marry up the activities that Russ is talking about and these to come together before the money ran out. So we did go our separate paths, but there is no reason why these activities can't be married downstream, and that was the high concept plan at the time. Another weakness, cumulative impacts, fishing pressure, climate change, and contaminants taken together, another area of weakness for us and everybody else who works on this stuff. Yeah. So, PNCIMA after the Oceans Action Plan. There are some continuing activities here. The PNCIMA GIS Atlas, and I think there's a poster over there somewhere that Kevin brought. bringing together much of the GIS work that was done that went into the ecosystem overview and into the ecologically and biologically sensitive area stuff, putting it in Atlas so that materials can be reused in the PNCIMA and other things. We are continuing an effort on state of the ocean reporting to track what's going on in marine ecosystems, including PNCIMA. We're also doing that at some different scales, including work that Canada is contributing through PICES, the North Pacific Marine Science Organization, which is doing an update of this, which is a status report of marine ecosystems around the North Pacific. This is quite useful. One of the ways you understand what's going on in ecosystems is compare and contrast with similar ones other places. DFO Science is embarked on an ecosystem research initiative, which in fact is not focused in PNCIMA. It's focused in Strait of Georgia, but that is developing the skills, tools, and models to better attack this ecosystem approach. And we have some modest new programs focused on emerging issues, hypoxia, ocean acidification, regional scale climate change, aquatic invasive species. Is it going to go? Okay, and here's an example from Kevin of the products from the GIS Atlas, and this is available in draft. I actually saw somebody carrying around a printed draft version, and coming soon to a website near you. And I'm done.